Welcome back to Gerodynamics. Okay, time for another political video. Yeah, let's talk about this. So, something that I've noticed, and I'm sure many of you have also noticed, is that people on the left, oftentimes, usually people on the left, sometimes it's people on the right, but typically speaking, it's people on the left, are very like isolated. They want to be in a bubble. They don't want to experience, someone saying things that they disagree with, right? So they leave Twitter or they unfriend people on Facebook or, they just isolate themselves in a way that they don't have to deal with it. And so like on my Facebook, right? My Twitter is more just politics. I don't really have friends on there. It's just all just some people who kind of have agreed with me politically that follow or whatever. But like I don't go out and look for people I know in real life on my Twitter account, right? But on my Facebook, it's my Facebook. It is what it is, and so I even went so far as I didn't post about this kind of stuff for the longest time. Then the election was coming up, and I wanted to post about it more. And instead of doing a bunch of little posts, I started doing like just giant posts where I would just combine it all into one post so it didn't like clutter people's timelines. And then I also even went so far as to say, if you want to not have to see these posts, I'll put you on like a filter where you don't see my political posts. I haven't been going out and commenting on my friends' posts, because I don't want them to think that I'm just being argumentative, I've been doing everything in my power to not offend people who really just don't want to see the stuff that I talk about, right? And still, even then, you like I've lost like Facebook friends like since Trump has won his election, and it's like, come on, you could have just asked me to like put you on the filter. I don't know what else, like what it's so weird to me, and to see people like leaving Twitter because they think it's toxic. Well, no, just your woman lost, and so now you're leaving Twitter because you're like in protest because Elon Musk owns it. You don't want like free speech. You don't want people to be able to express their opinions that you disagree with. So you're just running away to some other platform that's going to die very shortly. I don't understand it. Anyways, that's just a mini rant that I had. Of course, you do sometimes see that from people on the right. They'll unfriend people, but far more often, especially from my perspective, but far more often in general, I see this being something that people on the left do, and it's just sad. You know, do you really hate free speech so much that you just can't even be friends with somebody who might have a different opinion than you? It's so weird. All right, moving on, moving on. Let's see here. What else do we want to talk about politically here? Um, I want to go into spending again. So basically, this is the most important issue to me, is cutting spending. Recently, the national debt has been in the news again. It now exceeds 36 trillion. Interest on that national debt now exceeds over a trillion annually, and so it's just going to keep just skyrocketing. And it it can't just continue to skyrocket indefinitely. Eventually, there will have to be some sort of, either fix or things will come crashing down. And so we have to fix this problem. And so, we have, let's see here. So, um, I would even take spending cuts without the tax cuts until the debt is paid off. If somehow that could be guaranteed, I would take the spending cuts without the tax cuts. The problem is like oftentimes you'll get the one thing but not the other thing, and usually that's tax cuts without spending cuts. I would much rather, if we had to do that, to have it be spending cuts rather than tax cuts. But I don't even know that if you avoided or postponed the tax cuts, that it would help revenues to the point where it could help pay off this debt. And that would be the only reason that I would say do it is, the more revenue we have coming in should be, revenue that's able to be applied to the national debt. But I don't think that postponing the tax cuts necessarily guarantees that we have additional revenue. So let's talk about that a little bit. All the tax cuts could be needed to. Oh, that's a different topic. Let me come back to that. So here we are. We have tax revenues in 2023 were 4.44 trillion. They were 4.9 trillion in 2022. They were 4.05 trillion in 2021. They were 3.42 trillion in 2020, 3.46 trillion in 2019, 3.33 trillion in 2018, and 3.32 trillion in 2017. So let's talk about that a little bit. The tax cuts went into effect at the end of 2017 or the end of 2018. I think it was the end of 2017, and they took effect in 2018, right? So they were passed at the end of 2017, took effect in 2018. We didn't see an actual revenue decrease from the tax cuts, the Trump tax cuts, until 2020, when the whole shutdown happened, the pandemic and the shutdown. That's when we started actually seeing tax decreases, and that's because the GDP went down, and so that causes you to have revenue decreases. Tax cuts don't always and typically don't result in decreased revenue. So having these tax cuts is not necessarily an automatic yes, there's going to be a decreased revenue, no matter what the congressional budget office says, or no matter what Democrats say. They try to use this as a talking point that the tax cuts cost us billions of dollars or trillions of dollars and billions of dollars that could have gone to the deficit, and so that the debt didn't increase by as much. But they don't know that. They say that because that's the cut, but that doesn't mean that that's actually going to show up in real world terms with the actual revenue. So that's why they say it, but they can't prove it, and it's not something that historically happens. All right. So basically, tax cuts could still be implemented, and we could still see revenue increases. But if they're drastic tax cuts, that might be a different story. If they're drastic tax cuts to the point where, like, going to a flat tax or even eliminating the income tax, we could see revenues decrease. We could also see them then increase again if tariffs are implemented. So if that's the case, if tariffs are implemented, then you will see a huge increase to revenue. And the offset to that is that you may see some cost of living increases. Then that's obviously the point against doing tariffs is you're probably going to see cost of living increases, probably not as drastically as some people are trying to make them out to be, but you're going to see some cost of living increases. So you kind of need the tax cuts to offset the cost of living increases. So postponing the tax cuts and implementing tariffs could be a problem. So something that should be addressed. Maybe we shouldn't do both of those things, right? Postponing the tax cuts and implementing tariffs. You probably want to implement tax cuts if you're going to put in the tariffs, but that could lead to drastic revenue increases. However, let's just say nothing changes, that revenues stay the same, right? We're looking at getting close to 5 trillion in revenue in 2024, most likely. Now, mind you, it was quite a bit less in 2023, but there's reasons for that. But the revenue did drop down to, I think it was like 4.2 or 4.3 trillion in tax revenue, right? But before that, in 2022, it was close. It was like 4.9. So we're looking at a possibility. Let's just say best case scenario, 5 trillion in revenue. If we were able to apply that in total, in full, we're not able to, by the way. Oh, speaking of that, tax revenues is total tax revenues, not income tax. So income tax is only about a half of current tax revenues. If we implement tariffs, it'll be even much less. So when we talk about tax cuts is the income tax, right? Some people want to do business taxes, have a decrease to business taxes or have a decrease to capital gains taxes, those sorts of things. Social security taxes is a huge part of it too. And so if my thought was that we completely separate out Social Security, then that would be taken out of revenues also, right? So just keep all that in mind. But let's just go with 5 trillion just to keep numbers pretty simple. Um, Even if we applied all 5 trillion to the debt, zero spending, no Social Security, no nothing, right? That's obviously not going to happen. But let's say if we did, it would probably take about 8 years to pay off the national debt when you take into consideration interest. 8 years would be $40 trillion. Right now, the national debt is 36 trillion, and we have interest getting racked up at $1 trillion a year. So, but that would start decreasing. Interest would start decreasing as we're paying it off each year. It may take over 8 years, but I'm thinking 8 years is probably about what it would take, right, to get to that, to that point where the debt was completely gone. When you factor in the fact that 36 trillion plus interest over 8 years, right? Okay, so we're looking at like 8 years. That's not going to happen, right? It's going to take way longer to do that. And so we have to really this has to be our focus. We have to get in there. We have to say, we have to cut spending, maybe figure out other avenues of generating revenue. Tariffs is a possibility. There's other things that thinking outside of the box that you could figure out as far as, selling land, selling buildings and assets and things like that that the government no longer needs or shouldn't need. That would be a way to pay down debt. If you went out and you sold this land back to the states. Some of it you may need to give back though, because I don't know how much of it was actually purchased from the states. But there's different ways for the country to generate revenue to pay down these debts. One of the most wonky ways is like a lottery system, which is fun when you think about it, but it's also definitely when they say lottery is a tax on the poor, that is 100% true. Poor people go out and buy lottery tickets, right? But someone's going to win. Anyways, that's something to think about. It's not necessarily a serious idea, but it's an idea. All right. We have to figure out a way to pay it off. So let's look at we have the Department of Government Efficiency. It's not an actual department. It's just like Elon Musk and Vivek, and they're looking at bringing in more people to help them with this process of finding all the waste and going in and cutting as much of it, or advising the president on cutting as much of it as possible from the executive branch. They are going to look at waste in other branches, but they could only really get him to be able to make cuts in the executive branch, and he can unilaterally do that sort of thing. He may get some pushback. There may be lawsuits filed, things that they have to deal with, but still, that's under his authority, right? Then there's it looks like there's going to be a caucus in both the Senate and the House that is going to be the Department of Government Efficiency Caucus, Doge caucuses. Doge caucuses. Anyways, and it looks like there's going to be one in the Senate and one in the House. Looks like Joni Ernst, is that her name, Joni Ernst? Yeah, I think that's her name, is trying to head that. We'll see how that goes. She's kind of iffy. It's one of those things where it's like, you're super focused on government efficiency, huh? Maybe we shouldn't send all of our money to Ukraine. How about that? And because she's a big proponent of that. Anyways, that's a whole different topic. And then there's the House. I think Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's kind of kooky, but this might be a good thing for her to focus on. And so they're going to coordinate with Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy to be able to go in and like try to cut waste in the actual budget, through the legislative process also. So there's going to be executive cuts, there's going to be legislative cuts. Joni Ernst is saying that she has $1 trillion in cut recommendations in the Senate. If the House goes in and they find $1 trillion also, and it would need to be a different trillion, and I'm sure they have similar ideas of what is waste. So that's something they need to work on. But if somehow, let's just say somehow, they were able to find $1 trillion in cuts from the Senate, $1 trillion in cuts from the House, they form this package. That's $2 trillion in cuts to the federal budget. Great, right? And then word is that they're working on $2 trillion in cuts through the executive, through Elon Musk and Vivek going in and recommending cuts through the executive branch. If they were literally able to come up with $4 trillion in cuts, mind you, seems really excessive to me. I would love to see it. I'd love to see more. But when you start looking at that, I think the federal budget is somewhere between like $6 and $7 trillion, right? So it's more than half, which is a good thing. But can they do it? We'll see. We'll see. Anyways, let's just say they did, though. If they did, and we have say we have a $7 trillion budget, they cut 4, that leaves $3 trillion. That mean, and we have tax revenues of 5, right? So the budget's down to $3 trillion. We have tax revenues of 5. We can start applying $2 trillion to the debt immediately. No, it is a surplus, but it's not a surplus because we have debt. And that's kind of like what happened when Clinton was president. The House and the Senate were able to pass budgets that actually resulted in the spending being less than the revenues, so they called it a surplus. Clinton gets credit for that, but the House and the Senate are what passed it, and he just signed it into law. He opposed a lot of it, but he signed it, so he gets credit for it. And then that also had the Social Security taken into consideration in it. So was it really a surplus when Social Security is there, and really that money should just be going to the Social Security fund? Anyways, and then that's a whole nother thing. And then we had debt still. It's not like they paid off the national debt. And then Bush comes into office, and he's like, "Woo! Look at all this surplus that I have, right? That was handed to me from the previous administration and the previous Congress. I'm going to go ahead and give it out to people in like checks for like $200, right?" And I get it. I understand the concept. He's like, "This is your money. Let's give it back to you," right? Okay, I get it. But we should not do that this time. There will be a huge quote-unquote surplus. It should be applied to the national debt. Let's say all of it was. Let's say $2 trillion surplus is applied to the national debt. It would still take 18 years to pay this off. More because interest, right? Because it's 36 trillion. Without even taking interest into consideration, it would be 18 trillion. It's not going to be $1 trillion a year because you're paying down the debt. But at the beginning, it'll be $1 trillion. And so you're looking at probably like 20 to 25 years of paying off this national debt at $2 trillion a year. This is a long-term process that could be started right now, and it does need to be started immediately in January when they take office. But this is something it's not a quick fix, people, and you need to keep that in mind. That's something that we need to have. We need to continue it, right? So what needs to happen is there needs to be shown success, right? It needs to be shown that, one, you are actually paying down the debt, because if Trump is the president presiding over the first debt decrease in who knows how long, if he's found to be presiding over the first like surplus after surplus after surplus, if the economy booms, if cost of living for the most part goes down, we need inflation to come down. If cost of living is coming down for the most part, but you are seeing some cost of living increases in like groceries or or something where tariffs might have more of an impact, right? Then you need to see tax cuts that offset that, that people that are noticeable to people. Those sorts of things are going to make people think things are going great, right? So you have 4 years of Trump doing these things. Then you need to have someone who follows him who can continue these policies, and they need to continue to be a success. If you do have 4 years, 8 years, 16 years, or sorry, 12 years, right, um, of success, then I can't see it slowing down after that. So even if, say, someone else took office after that that wasn't as much of a hawk, the 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 culture has changed at that point, and we can then see this actually continue forward to the point where we're actually saying, you know what, it looks like we're really going to pay off this debt. Maybe we do generate huge amounts of revenue from tariffs and from other aspects, and that 20 to 25 years gets brought down to 10 to 15 years, right? And we start really seeing the end goal in sight. That's what I'm hoping is started here in January. And that's why I think that spending cuts are the most important aspect of what needs to be done moving forward. So tell me what you guys think about that. That's just my take on things. I would love to see it happen. I'm obviously, cautiously optimistic, but I could definitely see things not playing out that way. So let's hope. Let's hope that that's the direction that we go in. Let me know what you guys think. All right, everybody, take care. Have a good day.